"Mother, I've decided to move back in, and my wife has joined me." These were the precise words uttered by my son when I opened the front door on that particular Thursday afternoon. He hadn't sought permission, nor had he provided any prior notification. He simply appeared, accompanied by 2 substantial travel bags, a rucksack slung across his shoulder, and that familiar expression he invariably wore when he desired something from me. Chloe stood directly behind him, shielded by dark sunglasses, despite the fact that the sun was already descending towards the horizon. Her gaze swept over my residence, as if she were meticulously scrutinizing every nook, every wall, and every detail that displeased her. I remained silent in that instant, taking a single step backward and allowing them to enter. However, something deep within me, something that had lain dormant for years, began to awaken with a profound sense of unease that I found impossible to dismiss. I am 70 years of age. For 70 years I have dedicated every ounce of my being to this family. 70 years of prioritizing others above myself, of cooking, cleaning, nurturing, and diligently saving every last penny so that my children might possess that which I was denied. My husband departed this world 5 years ago. When he passed, I genuinely believed my own life had ended alongside his. For an extended period, I struggled to define myself, no longer a wife, no longer the mother upon whom everyone depended. Yet gradually, with the invaluable assistance of my confidant, Joyce, I commenced the process of rediscovering myself. I truly mastered the art of using my mobile telephone, far beyond merely receiving calls. Now, I utilize WhatsApp, Facebook, and even maintain an Instagram account where I share photographs from my outings with friends. I frequent the beauty salon every 2 weeks for manicures and have my hair colored a striking chestnut brown, a shade that revitalizes my spirit. Each morning, I engage in a leisurely walk through the park with a group of like-minded women who, like myself, have concluded that life's vibrancy does not diminish upon reaching one's 60th year. Last year, I enrolled in an online culinary course focused on baking. I forged new friendships and began to embrace a life centered on my own fulfillment, rather than solely on the needs of others. This dwelling is my own. I acquired it using my husband's life insurance proceeds and the savings I accumulated over 3 decades of part-time employment at a textile establishment. Every brick, every window pane, and every bloom in the front garden was chosen by me. It is modest, comprising merely 2 bedrooms, a capacious living area, a functional kitchen, and a rear garden patio where I cultivate my collection of potted flora, attending to them with daily devotion. Nevertheless, it is unequivocally mine. It was not bestowed upon me as a gift, nor was its acquisition a favor. I financed it. I curated its interior and made every singular decision concerning its contents. For these past 5 years, I resided here in solitary tranquility. My son, Marcus, would pay visits every 2 to 3 months, always in haste, invariably requesting financial assistance that was never repaid. He always bore that knowing look of a son, aware that his mother would never refuse him. However, he had never, under any circumstances, arrived in such a manner, laden with luggage and without prior arrangement. Upon their entry, Chloe offered a perfunctory greeting, her smile failing to reach her eyes, and immediately proceeded to survey the living room, as if encountering an unfamiliar environment requiring thorough inspection. She paused before the cream-colored sofa adorned with floral cushions, a piece I had acquired 2 years prior and cherished dearly, wrinkling her nose in disapproval. Marcus deposited the suitcases in the center of the room and bestowed upon me a brief, perfunctory embrace, the kind exchanged by those seeking to project affection while preoccupied with other matters. "Mother," he began, stepping back and casting a glance towards the kitchen. "We required a change of scenery. Our circumstances at the apartment deteriorated, and we believed it would be beneficial to reside here with you for a period." Chloe offered an accompanying nod, avoiding direct eye contact. "Just for a while," she reiterated, her tone conveying a sense of finality rather than temporariness. I refrained from questioning them about the reasons for their visit or their failure to communicate in advance. I omitted mentioning my preference for even a day's warning to mentally prepare myself, to contemplate, and to ascertain whether this was a situation I genuinely desired. I merely nodded, as I had consistently done, and indicated that they could occupy the room I used for storage. Marcus responded with a relieved smile. Chloe finally removed her sunglasses, meeting my gaze directly for the first time. "Thank you, Alara," she stated, addressing me by my given name, eschewing any maternal titles, thus establishing a tone akin to professional colleagues. "We will require ample closet space," she added, before resuming her perambulation and inspection. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay in my bed, my eyes fixed on the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of my own home, which now seemed subtly altered. Through the walls, I could discern the low murmur of Marcus and Chloe's voices, punctuated occasionally by their laughter. At one point, I overheard Chloe mentioning a desire to redecorate, to which Marcus readily agreed, noting the abundance of outdated items that had become superfluous. Though they did not explicitly mention my name, I perceived their discourse as implicitly referring to me as well, as if I were a component of the household inventory slated for an upgrade. I rose, proceeded to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stood in the darkness, experiencing a sensation that had been absent from my own home since the day I purchased it. I felt like an unwelcome intruder. I felt profoundly uncomfortable. I felt diminished. The following morning, I awoke at my customary early hour. After showering and dressing in a favored pair of jeans and a pink blouse, I brushed my hair and set out for my customary morning promenade. Joyce was already awaiting me in the park, her portable beverage container at the ready, accompanied by her characteristic broad smile. "Ara," she exclaimed, embracing me warmly. "It's a minor miracle you arrived punctually. Typically, I am the one enduring the wait." As we proceeded with our walk, I recounted the entirety of the preceding events. I informed her of Marcus's unannounced arrival, Chloe's accompanying presence, and their apparent assumption of proprietorship over the household. Joyce halted her stride and regarded me with a somber expression. "And what was your response?" she inquired. "Nothing," I confessed. I offered no verbal resistance. Joyce sighed, shaking her head. "Ara, that residence is unequivocally yours. You financed its acquisition. The prerogative of deciding who resides within its confines rests solely with you." "I am aware of that," I replied. "However, I was unable to refuse my own son." Joyce exhaled softly. "My dear, the fundamental issue often lies not in our inability to decline, but rather in the fact that no one ever imparted to us the inherent right to do so." Upon my return home, approximately 2 hours later, the scene that greeted me upon opening the door rendered me utterly immobile. Chloe had taken it upon herself to rearrange my furnishings. My cream-colored sofa had been repositioned against an opposing wall, and my cherished floral cushions were haphazardly piled in a corner. The coffee table, where I habitually placed my teacup and current reading material, had been relocated to the patio. Marcus was actively engaged in affixing a remarkably large canvas to the primary wall, a contemporary piece adorned with stark gray and black lines that I found utterly abhorrent. Chloe stood amidst the living room, hands on her hips, orchestrating the entire operation with the demeanor of an interior design professional. "Oh, Alara, you're back," she remarked upon noticing my presence. "We're implementing some minor adjustments to imbue the space with a more contemporary, revitalized ambiance. We trust you won't object." My gaze fell upon my displaced cushions, then to my repositioned sofa, and finally to the offensive artwork Marcus was attempting to hang in the very spot where a treasured family photograph had previously resided. An overwhelming urge to vocalize my protest surged within me, to assert my ownership and demand that nothing be moved without my explicit consent. Instead, I offered a smile, that practiced automatic expression I had honed over decades, and responded, "It's perfectly acceptable. Proceed as you deem fit." Chloe's face registered a look of satisfaction, and she resumed issuing directives. The days began to meld into an indistinguishable continuum, and my home gradually ceased to feel like my own. Each morning I awoke with the anticipation of discovering further alterations, displaced possessions, or elements that no longer resonated with my sense of belonging. Chloe had effectively assumed control of the kitchen. She relocated my dinnerware to cabinets situated beyond my easy reach, and arranged her own expensive cookware in the space where mine had been stored. Periodically, when I attempted to prepare a meal, she would materialize with that characteristic half-smile and suggest, "Alara, allow me to manage this. You've dedicated a lifetime to cooking. Perhaps it's time to simply relax." While her words might have sounded considerate, the underlying tone conveyed a subtly dismissive message, implying my current obsolescence and the conclusion of my tenure in that culinary domain. Marcus offered no mitigating influence. He spent the majority of his days reclining on the sofa, engrossed in his mobile device. At times, he would depart and return at a late hour, offering no explanation for his whereabouts. When I inquired about his job search efforts, his response was invariably, "Mother, I'm actively pursuing opportunities. Please don't worry." However, worry I did. My anxiety stemmed from his complete lack of financial contribution towards household expenses and the noticeable depletion of my funds during grocery excursions. One afternoon, while Chloe was occupied with her ablutions and Marcus was out, I seized the opportune moment to inspect the pantry. Nearly all the provisions I had procured the preceding week had vanished. In their stead were items brought by Chloe, premium brands I could not conceivably afford. Upon opening the refrigerator, I discovered a similar scenario: organic yogurts, imported cheeses, and cold-pressed juices priced at a significant premium. A knot of apprehension tightened in my stomach. My financial resources consist of a modest pension, and the savings painstakingly accumulated over many years. Maintaining such an elevated level of expenditure was simply beyond my means. Yet as Chloe emerged from the bathroom, her hair enveloped in a towel, and passed through the kitchen, I maintained my silence. I merely closed the refrigerator door and retreated to my private chambers. Later that evening, as I lay in bed attempting to find repose, I overheard voices emanating from the living area. I rose discreetly and approached my bedroom door, ensuring not to create any audible disturbance. Marcus and Chloe were engaged in conversation. "Do not raise your voice," Chloe cautioned. "Your mother might overhear." Marcus responded with an indistinct utterance, but Chloe's voice then became remarkably clear, her tone sharp and pointed. "This residence is ideal for our purposes. It's situated in a desirable locale, offers adequate space, and most advantageously, we are not obligated to incur rental payments." The air seemed to evacuate my lungs. Marcus interjected something about me, words that sounded akin to, "But it belongs to her." Chloe emitted a soft chuckle. "For the present time," she stated. "Consider this, Marcus. Your mother is 70 years old. Her lifespan is finite. Upon her passing, this dwelling will rightfully become yours. Why, then, defer the inevitable? We can commence implementing our preferences now. She will not object. She invariably refrains from doing so." I stood frozen behind the door, Chloe's pronouncements echoing relentlessly in my mind. She will not live forever. We can do things our way. She will not say anything. She never says anything. Something within me fractured. It was a profound breaking, a culmination of years of suppressed resilience. It transcended mere pain. It was an epiphany, the unvarnished truth confronting me with no recourse for evasion. My son had not visited out of concern for my well-being. He had orchestrated a strategic occupation of my home, awaiting my demise to claim my established assets without any semblance of respect. And I, as had been my pattern, was allowing this violation to transpire. I returned to my bed, but sleep remained elusive throughout the night. I lay contemplating the ceiling, my body trembling with a confluence of fury, sorrow, and an emotion I could not precisely define. I did not weep. I had long since learned that tears rarely alter circumstances. However, that night, a decision was forged, a quiet, resolute, and unyielding resolution. I would not resort to shouting, nor would I create a scene. I would not implore them to grant me their respect. My course of action would be decisive. I would reclaim my life, my home, and my inherent dignity. And I would achieve this through the sole method effective with individuals who fail to comprehend reasoned discourse, through tangible action. The following day, I arose at my customary hour, attended to my personal hygiene, and dressed. I partook of a plain cup of coffee, as all the bread had been consumed. Chloe had depleted it entirely and neglected to replenish the supply. I donned a crisp white blouse and my favored pair of denim trousers. Grabbing my handbag, I departed the residence without divulging my destination to anyone. I proceeded 3 blocks to the office of attorney Lena Davis, a legal professional whom I had encountered the previous year at a seminar on senior citizens' rights conducted at the community center. Lena was a woman in her 50s, possessing a direct and intelligent demeanor, exuding an energy indicative of someone impervious to intimidation. Upon entering her office, she looked up from her computer screen and offered a welcoming smile. "Ara, what a pleasant surprise. Is everything proceeding satisfactorily?" "No," I replied, taking a seat opposite her. "Nothing is satisfactory, and I require your assistance." I proceeded to recount every detail of my predicament. Marcus's unannounced arrival, Chloe's intrusive presence, the modifications to my home, and the clandestine conversation I had inadvertently overheard the previous evening. Lena listened attentively, occasionally jotting notes and nodding her head in understanding. Upon the conclusion of my narrative, she placed her pen on her desk and met my gaze directly. "Elara," she inquired, "is the deed to your residence registered solely in your name?" "Yes," I affirmed. "Everything is officially recorded under my name. My husband bequeathed all his possessions to me in his final testament." "Excellent," Lena responded. "That is the primary confirmation we required. Now, have you by any chance signed any legal documents recently? Any power of attorney, any authorization forms, or any other requests that Marcus or Chloe might have presented to you?" I shook my head in negation. "No, nothing of that nature." Lena exhaled a sigh of relief. "Perfect. Therefore, from a legal standpoint, your home remains entirely under your ownership, and no one can forcibly dispossess you. However, we must act with expediency. before they instigate further actions. She proceeded to articulate her counsel in a calm and measured tone. Her initial recommendation was to secure all my vital documentation: property deeds, birth certificates, and financial records. Every item required safeguarding in a secure location inaccessible to Marcus and Chloe. Furthermore, she advised modifying my online banking credentials, particularly if Marcus possessed any prior knowledge of them. Subsequently, she introduced a consideration I had not previously contemplated: surveillance. Lena elaborated, "You must meticulously document the events transpiring within your home. If they are enacting changes without your authorization or behaving as though they are the proprietors, you need incontrovertible evidence. You can acquire small, discrete surveillance devices capable of recording all activities. Should this situation escalate to a legal dispute, these recordings will prove invaluable." I absorbed her words with a decisive nod. "And following that?" I inquired. Lena responded, "You will then engage in an action that I anticipate will prove challenging for you, yet it is an absolute necessity. You will confront them, not with aggression or theatrics, but with a calm and resolute declaration that they must depart. If they fail to comply willingly, we will initiate legal proceedings to compel their eviction, potentially through a court order, if required." I departed Lena's office with a clearly defined strategy firmly established in my mind, and a peculiar sensation residing within my chest. It was not an emotion of happiness, nor one of serenity, but rather an unwavering sense of determination. For 70 years I had permitted others to dictate my circumstances and to appropriate what they desired from me without seeking my consent. I had offered smiles when my inclination was to express displeasure. I had acquiesced when my instinct was to refuse. I had maintained silence when my heart was brimming with unspoken sentiments. However, that era had decisively concluded. The individual who exited that office was no longer the same person who had opened her door days earlier, allowing her son unrestricted entry. I arrived home carrying a discreet paper bag from a local pharmacy. Within it were not medicinal supplies, but rather 2 small surveillance cameras procured from an electronics vendor, situated near Lena's office. The sales associate provided clear instructions on their operation, including Wi-Fi connectivity and remote viewing capabilities via my mobile telephone in real time. I experienced a peculiar sensation while making the purchase, as though I were engaged in a clandestine act, a transgression akin to espionage within my own domicile. However, Chloe's dismissive words immediately resurfaced in my mind, transforming my initial apprehension into resolute conviction. Upon entering my home, I found it eerily silent. Marcus was absent. Chloe was situated in the living room, engaged in a telephone conversation, her laughter punctuated by the sounds of the person on the other end. She did not even acknowledge my presence as I passed by. I proceeded directly to my bedroom, secured the door, and retrieved the cameras. I meticulously reviewed the accompanying instructions on 2 separate occasions to ensure complete comprehension. I downloaded the requisite application onto my telephone, established the Wi-Fi connection for the cameras, and awaited the signal indicating their operational status. Witnessing my own living room displayed on my mobile screen evoked a complex mixture of relief and melancholy. Relief stemmed from the assurance of possessing concrete evidence of any unfolding events. Melancholy arose from the realization that I had reached a juncture where internal surveillance was necessary to safeguard myself from my own offspring. I patiently awaited Chloe's departure from the living room. I heard her proceed to the bathroom and close the door. Swiftly exiting my room, I concealed one of the cameras within my hand. I strategically placed it on a high shelf in the living room, discreetly positioned behind a decorative ceramic vase acquired at a craft market years ago. From this vantage point, the camera encompassed the entirety of the living room and extended its coverage to a portion of the kitchen. Its presence would likely go unnoticed unless one possessed specific knowledge of its location. I hastily retreated to my bedroom just as Chloe emerged from the bathroom. My heart was pounding with such intensity that I feared she might detect it, yet thankfully, no such awareness was demonstrated. Chloe returned to the living room and resumed her activities as if no significant alteration had occurred. I reserved the second camera for a later deployment, uncertain of its optimal placement at that precise moment, but cognizant of its future utility. I returned to my bed and activated the application on my mobile device. The live feed of my living room was now accessible. Chloe was seated on my sofa, now positioned according to her preference, engrossed in her mobile device. Outwardly, the scene appeared entirely unremarkable, yet I was privy to the underlying reality. I understood her unspoken disdain for me and her anticipation of future events. Later that afternoon, Joyce sent me a text message. "How are you holding up, dear? Have you spoken with your son yet?" I responded that I had not yet initiated a conversation, but that a plan was actively in development. She then sent me an audio message. "I've known you for over 20 years, Ara. I recognize your inherent strength, but I also acknowledge that you occasionally employ that fortitude to endure circumstances you ought not to. Do not permit them to expropriate what rightfully belongs to you. Do not allow them to engender the perception that you are overreacting. You possess an absolute right to your own home, to your own peace. If you require my presence to accompany you when you speak with them, I will gladly do so. You are not alone." Her words instilled within me a sensation that had been conspicuously absent for days: warmth, unwavering support, and the profound certainty that despite Marcus's profound disappointment, there remained individuals in my life who genuinely valued me. The subsequent days were characterized by a continuous performance of outward normalcy. I maintained my accustomed demeanor. Good morning, good afternoon, accompanied by fleeting smiles and silent affirmations. Internally, however, a significant transformation had occurred. I meticulously observed Marcus and Chloe's every action and attentively monitored their conversations. I regularly accessed my mobile device to review the camera recordings, and the information I obtained served to corroborate every suspicion I harbored. One morning, during my customary walk with Joyce in the park, I accessed the live feed on my telephone. Chloe was engaged in measuring the dimensions of the living room windows with a tape measure, while Marcus stood beside her, diligently recording information on his mobile device. I overheard Chloe remark, "These aesthetically unpleasing curtains must be removed. We shall opt for contemporary blinds, the kind that operate via remote control." I presented the video footage to Joyce, who responded with a shake of her head in utter disbelief. "Ara, this transcends mere disrespect. This is an outright invasion. They are undertaking renovations in your home as if it were already their property. You must intervene." "I am aware," I replied, "and I shall, but not at this juncture. I require further substantiation. I need them to fully reveal their intentions." Later that afternoon, Chloe engaged in an action that sent a shiver of apprehension down my spine. She arrived home accompanied by an unknown man, impeccably dressed in a business shirt and carrying a briefcase. She ushered him into my living room, offered him coffee prepared in my kitchen, and proceeded to display photographs from her mobile device. From the confines of my bedroom, I observed the entire interaction via the camera feed, with the audio volume set low, yet sufficient to discern their conversation. The gentleman in question was a real estate agent. Chloe was presenting him with images of my residence, captured from various perspectives. "We are contemplating listing the property in the forthcoming months," Chloe explained, in her characteristic dulcet tone, employed when seeking to achieve a specific objective. "We wish to ascertain its potential market value. The neighborhood is desirable. The nearby educational institutions boast commendable reputations, and the dwelling is in excellent structural condition." "Well," the agent commented, surveying the room, "it does require some modernization. However, it undoubtedly possesses significant potential. I would estimate a listing price between $180,000 and $200,000, contingent upon the extent of renovations undertaken prior to sale." My blood boiled. Chloe was evaluating my home, the dwelling I acquired through my own financial resources, my diligent labor, and years of dedicated savings. And there she sat, on my sofa, meticulously planning its sale, as if the transaction were already finalized, as if my very existence were irrelevant. The agent presented her with his business card, advising her to contact him when she was prepared to proceed. The moment the door clicked shut, Chloe's fingers flew to her phone, initiating a call. "Did you connect with the property evaluator?" Marcus inquired from the other end of the line. "Indeed," Chloe responded. "He indicated we could potentially secure up to $200,000, provided we implement a few enhancements. With those funds, we could acquire something superior, more spacious, situated in a more contemporary locale." "And my mother?" Marcus questioned. Chloe let out a weary sigh, as if the inquiry were a bothersome imposition. "Marcus, we've discussed this. Your mother will be quite all right. There are exceptionally pleasant assisted living facilities suited for individuals her age, establishments where she will receive attentive care, where she will find companionship, and where she will be entirely free from concern. It will be beneficial for her as well. You acknowledge this?" Marcus remained silent for a brief interlude. Then he conceded, "Yes, you are correct. It is the most advantageous course for everyone involved. I meticulously saved the video recording. I preserved it along with the date, the precise time, and every single word uttered by them. Lena had impressed upon me the necessity of concrete evidence. Now, I possessed it. Unambiguous, direct, and irrefutable proof that my son and his wife were orchestrating a scheme to seize my home, liquidate it, and then confine me to an assisted living facility, without so much as a by your leave, without any consideration for my desires, and without acknowledging that this dwelling represented the sole tangible asset I possessed after a lifetime dedicated to sacrifice. I abstained from partaking in dinner with them that evening. I conveyed that I was feeling unwell and intended to retire for the night. I retreated to my chamber, closing the door behind me, and sat upon my bed, my mobile device clutched in my hand. I dispatched the video to Lena. Her reply arrived within minutes. "Ara, this is invaluable. With this, we can definitively establish intent to perpetrate fraud and exploitation. Are you prepared to act?" I responded, "Yes." I was more resolute than I had ever been in my entire existence. 3 additional days elapsed, during which I maintained the pretense of complete unawareness, as if I had not overheard their clandestine plans, as if I had not captured recordings of their every spoken word, when they believed themselves to be unobserved. I continued my established routine, rising early, preparing my coffee, embarking on my customary walk, and returning to a residence that progressively felt less and less like my own. Chloe had introduced further embellishments, new decorative cushions, contemporary artwork, and even a stylish floor lamp for the living room corner, an item whose cost exceeded my monthly grocery expenditure. Marcus remained without gainful employment, contributing nothing to the household's finances, and dedicating his days to lounging on the sofa or venturing out without disclosing his destination. One afternoon, while I was in my room meticulously organizing my crucial documents into a folder destined for safekeeping at Joyce's residence, I detected raised voices emanating from the living room. Chloe and Marcus were engaged in a heated exchange. I activated the camera application on my phone and amplified the volume. "Marcus, we've been here for nearly 3 weeks, and you haven't fulfilled any of your commitments," Chloe articulated, her tone imbued with an unfamiliar harshness. "You were supposed to broach the subject of the house with your mother, to subtly probe her sentiments, to begin acclimating her to the notion." "I understand, Chloe, but it's not that straightforward," Marcus replied. "She's my mother. I can't simply approach her and declare our intention to divest her home." "Certainly you can," Chloe interjected. "You merely need to articulate it judiciously. Inform her that it is for her ultimate benefit, that a dwelling of such magnitude is an overwhelming burden for her to manage alone, and that she would receive superior care in a dedicated facility. Engineer it so that she perceives it as her own initiative." Marcus emitted a sigh. "I'm uncertain if that strategy will prove effective. You don't comprehend her disposition as I do. When she becomes set on something, she exhibits considerable obstinacy." Chloe emitted a laugh, devoid of any genuine mirth. "Marcus, your mother is 70 years of age. She has dedicated her entire life to acquiescing to the directives of others. She has embodied the role of the compliant spouse, the self-sacrificing mother, the woman who invariably refrains from dissent. Her disposition is unlikely to undergo a transformation now. You simply need to apply a degree of pressure, employ guilt if necessary, recapitulate every kindness you have extended to her, even if factually inaccurate. Individuals of her generation are profoundly influenced by the emotion of guilt." Marcus fell into silence. I remained seated on my bed, my grip on my phone so vice-like that my knuckles had turned a stark white. The realization of my own son's acquiescence, while his wife dissected my character as a manipulable elder, as an individual devoid of personal agency, as an impediment to be surreptitiously removed through carefully chosen words, was a torment, far exceeding any direct denunciation. "Very well," Marcus finally conceded. "I shall speak with her tomorrow." "Excellent," Chloe responded, then added a further stipulation. "And Marcus, when you engage with her, bear in mind that this endeavor is not solely for our benefit. It is also for yours. That residence holds considerable monetary value. It represents your inheritance. Why defer enjoying it until after her passing? We can liquidate it presently, acquire superior accommodations, and achieve a mutually beneficial outcome, even for her, as her expenses will be fully covered in a comfortable facility." Marcus uttered an inaudible mumble, but I discerned from the intonation that he had completely capitulated. I saved the video, another addition to my growing compilation, another testament to their true characters. Sleep eluded me once more that night, not from sorrow this time, but from a distinct sensation of contained fury, profound indignation, and the absolute clarity of recognizing that my son, the child I had nurtured, provided for, clothed, and for whom I had labored extensively over many years to ensure his access to quality education, now perceived me as a mere instrument for financial gain, and his wife, who moved in and out of my home with the entitlement of its proprietor, viewed me as nothing more than an obstacle to their avaricious aspirations. The subsequent day, I arose earlier than my customary hour. I dressed with deliberate care. I donned a simple, elegant beige dress that imparted a sense of dignity. I styled my hair with meticulous attention. I adorned myself with the pearl earrings bestowed upon me by my husband on the occasion of our 25th wedding anniversary. Gazing into the mirror, I beheld a 70-year-old woman, still standing, still possessing fortitude, still holding a voice, even if it had remained largely silent for an extended period. Today, that voice would be employed. I exited my chamber and discovered Marcus alone in the kitchen, engrossed in his morning coffee. Chloe was still slumbering. Perfect. I desired to engage with him privately. "Good morning, Mother," he greeted, his gaze fixed on his mobile device, unyielding. I poured myself a cup of coffee and took a seat opposite him at the modest kitchen table. "Marcus, we need to converse," I stated, my voice quiet yet imbued with unwavering resolve. He looked up, his expression betraying surprise at my tone. "Certainly, Mother." "Regarding what?" he inquired, attempting a semblance of casualness, though the apprehension in his eyes was palpable. "Regarding this situation," I replied. "Regarding your and Chloe's presence here." Marcus placed his phone face down on the table. "Mother, if this pertains to financial matters, I can assist you once I secure employment. I am awaiting a few promising opportunities." "It is not about finances, Marcus," I interjected. "It is about all the surrounding circumstances. It is about your arrival without prior notification. It is about your alterations to my home without my consent. It is about Chloe's proprietorial demeanor within this residence." Marcus's brow furrowed. "Mother, we were merely endeavoring to enhance the space, to render it more contemporary and comfortable for everyone." "I did not solicit assistance," I responded, my voice maintaining its composure, yet each word carried substantial weight. "This is my abode, Marcus. I acquired it. I financed it. I dictate its appearance, its contents, and its occupants." Marcus's complexion paled. "Mother, you are my parent. How can I be denied residency in your home when I am in need? You may reside here when you extend the courtesy of a request, when you consult me beforehand, and when you comprehend that this is not a transient lodging where one can simply arrive and establish occupancy." Marcus rose abruptly from his chair, his agitation escalating. "I cannot fathom your pronouncements. What has transpired to you? You have never behaved in this manner." "Precisely," I countered, meeting his gaze directly. "I have never acted thus, and therein lay my error. My mistake was permitting everyone to impose their will upon me, upon my time, upon my possessions, upon my life. But that era has concluded, Marcus." At that precise moment, Chloe appeared in the kitchen doorway, still clad in her sleepwear, her hair disheveled. "What is transpiring in here?" she inquired, her tone laced with annoyance. Marcus glanced at her, a silent plea for intervention evident in his expression. "My mother is asserting that she does not desire our presence." Chloe fixed her gaze upon me, her expression attempting to feign surprise but revealing underlying vexation. "All? Are you serious? After all that Marcus has done for you, this is how you repay him?" I met her stare, unblinking. "What precisely has Marcus done for me, Chloe? Visiting me every 3 months, soliciting funds he never repays, appearing at my home unannounced, and treating it as if it were his own. Enlighten me, if you would be so kind." Chloe opened her mouth to reply, but I preempted her. "No, allow me. Permit me to articulate what I am privy to. I am aware that you procured a property appraiser for my residence. I am aware that you are planning its sale. I am aware that you are already contemplating my relocation to a residential facility without my consent. I am cognizant of everything, Chloe. Everything. The ensuing silence was absolute. Marcus remained frozen. Chloe's eyes widened, attempting to comprehend the source of my knowledge. Chloe was the first to break free from the shock. Her countenance shifted from surprise to something harder, more calculated. I have no comprehension of your assertions, Ara. I believe you are experiencing confusion. At your age, it is not uncommon for one's thoughts to become somewhat disoriented. A surge of incandescent rage coursed through me at her attempt to portray me as senile, as if my advanced age were a malady that impaired my cognitive faculties. I am not disoriented, Chloe. I possess proof, recordings of every exchange, of every conversation you have held within this dwelling, under the assumption of my unawareness, of the appraiser you engaged, of your intentions to liquidate my home. Marcus recoiled as if struck by an invisible blow. Mother, you recorded us. How could you? His tone conveyed indignation, as if I were the perpetrator of an egregious transgression. How could I? That question is easily answered, Marcus, I stated, rising from my chair, my voice finally resonating with the full measure of strength I had suppressed for weeks. I could because this is my domicile, because I possess the inherent right to ascertain the happenings within my own abode, particularly given your uninvited presence. You have comported yourselves as proprietors. You have schemed to expropriate the sole possession that remains to me, and you presumed me too aged, too subservient to perceive your machinations. Chloe crossed her arms resolutely. This is preposterous. You cannot expel us. Marcus is your son. What manner of mother would cast her own child onto the streets? The kind of mother who is utterly fatigued by being treated as inconsequential, I replied. The kind of mother who comprehends that familial bonds do not grant license for disrespect. The kind of mother who has finally resolved that her own existence holds intrinsic value as well. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, visibly distressed. Mother, if you were privy to all of this, why did you not disclose it sooner? Why the protracted delay? Because I required certainty, I stated. I needed to secure irrefutable evidence. I needed to definitively ascertain your true natures before taking action. And now, I possess that knowledge. Chloe emitted a derisive laugh. Very well. You have apprehended us. And now what? Will you summon the authorities? Will you cast us out as if we were common criminals? We are your family. No, I interrupted, fixing my gaze directly upon her. You are not my family. You are an individual who wed my son, and your sole contribution since entering my home has been to exhibit disrespect and to conspire towards my financial ruin. And Marcus, I turned to him, you ceased to be the son I knew the moment you determined that my residence held greater value than my personal dignity. Marcus's eyes welled with tears. Whether from fury or shame, I could not ascertain. Mother, everything escalated beyond our initial intentions. Initially, we merely sought temporary refuge while we sought more suitable accommodations. However, Chloe began to speak of advantageous opportunities, investments, and the substantial worth of this property, which she deemed to be underutilized. I never intended to cause you harm, I stated, a complex mixture of disappointment and dawning clarity washing over me. So, Chloe was the one who influenced you, I concluded. Marcus offered no verbal response, but his silence was a damning affirmation. Chloe did not offer a defense. She simply regarded me with that chilling expression, which I now recognized as her genuine countenance. You have 1 week to vacate my premises, I declared, my voice firm. 1 week to gather your belongings and depart my home in the precise condition it was prior to your arrival. Failure to comply will necessitate legal recourse. I have retained legal counsel. I possess the requisite evidence, and I hold every right in the world to reclaim my sanctuary. Chloe took a step towards me. You cannot inflict this upon us. We have nowhere to go. You should have contemplated that prior to plotting to sell my own home, I retorted, standing my ground. Your subsequent whereabouts are of no concern to me. Your departure from this location is paramount. Marcus attempted to approach me, but I raised my hand, halting his advance. No, Marcus, do not attempt to embrace me. Do not feign an expectation of reconciliation through such gestures. You have transgressed a boundary that is irrevocably crossed, and the most egregious aspect is not your premeditated actions. The most profound offense is your assumption that I was so insignificant, so invisible, so diminished, that consultation with me was even unnecessary. You intended to relocate me as if I were a cumbersome piece of antique furniture obstructing your path. You planned to confine me to a residential facility while you reveled in the financial gains I labored my entire life to acquire. Tears welled in his eyes. Mother, forgive me. The words, forgive me, echoed with hollowness, devoid of sincerity. It is too late. I turned and walked towards my chamber. Behind me, I heard Chloe whisper, "This is your fault, Marcus. I urged you to act with greater celerity." I closed the door, sat upon my bed, and for the first time in weeks, I experienced a sensation akin to profound relief. I had spoken my truth. I had confronted them. The pretense was over. The silent endurance had ceased. I had utilized my voice, and in doing so, I had reclaimed my personal space. I retrieved my phone and composed a message to Lena. I spoke with them. I informed them they have 1 week to depart. Her reply was instantaneous. "Excellent. Ara, how are you feeling?" I read her question and contemplated my response. "I feel empowered," I typed. "For the first time in a considerable duration, I feel powerful." The subsequent days were fraught with palpable tension. Marcus and Chloe barely acknowledged my presence. They consumed their meals in their room. They departed without disclosing their destinations, returning late into the evening. I monitored their conversations via the hidden cameras. Chloe remained convinced I was bluffing, that I lacked the resolve to actually evict them. Marcus, however, was less certain. He understood his mother sufficiently to recognize that when I made a decision, I adhered to it, even though he had never witnessed me assert myself in such a manner previously. On the 4th day, Joyce arrived for a visit. I had apprised her of the entire situation via telephone, but she desired to see me in person. Upon opening the door and seeing me, she enveloped me in a warm embrace. "Ara, I am so immensely proud of you. You cannot possibly imagine." We settled in the living room, now somewhat disarranged by Chloe's recent additions, items I knew would soon be removed. "How are you truly feeling?" Joyce inquired. "Apprehensive," I admitted. "Sad, yet also more vibrantly alive than I have felt in years. It is as though I have been slumbering and have finally awakened." Joyce nodded understandingly. "It is often the most agonizing awakenings, my dear, but also the most essential." She clasped my hand. "Remember, you are not isolated in this. If they fail to depart within the designated week, I shall accompany you when the authorities arrive. I will stand by your side through every step of the process." I expressed my gratitude, tears welling in my eyes, tears that this time were not born of sorrow, but of profound thankfulness. I had, in essence, lost my son in the process of rediscovering myself, but I had gained the unwavering certainty that there were still individuals in my life who held me in high regard. That night, lying in bed, my gaze fixed upon the ceiling, I detected Marcus and Chloe arguing once more. This time, the confrontation was more strident, more desperate. Chloe was assigning blame to Marcus for his lack of prompt action. Marcus was retaliating by faulting Chloe for pressuring him into a course of action he should never have entertained. I heard the sounds of breaking crockery, the slamming of doors, and vehement voices that penetrated the walls. Amidst the ensuing chaos, I lay in my bed, composed, resolute in my decision. Their interpersonal drama no longer held sway over me. Their justifications held no weight. My sole concern was the reacquisition of my peace. The 6th day dawned with an unusual tranquility. Marcus and Chloe had commenced packing certain belongings, though not their entire possessions. Boxes were present in the living room, yet numerous personal effects remained dispersed throughout the residence, as if they harbored a faint hope that I might reconsider my stance. My resolve, however, remained unaltered. Each morning, I awoke with the same unwavering determination. Each night, I retired to bed with the certitude that I was acting in alignment with what was right, despite the emotional cost. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. Upon opening the door, I encountered an unfamiliar woman. She appeared to be approximately 50 years of age, attired in professional business attire and carrying a briefcase. "Good afternoon. Is this Mrs. Aller Vance?" she inquired, her smile polite and professional. "Yes, that is correct," I replied, adopting a cautious demeanor. "I am mediator Valerie Flores," she announced, presenting a business card. "I am here on behalf of your son, Marcus. He has engaged my services to discuss the possibility of family mediation." A disquieting sensation churned in my stomach. My son had retained legal counsel without informing me. I permitted her entry, driven by a desire to ascertain the precise nature of Marcus's stratagem. We occupied seats in the living room. Chloe and Marcus emerged from their room upon hearing voices. Mediator Flores opened her briefcase and extracted several documents. "Mrs. Vance, I understand that a complex situation is unfolding within this residence. Your son has conveyed that you wish for him and his wife to vacate, but they contend that certain legal considerations necessitate examination." "Legal considerations?" I repeated, feeling a surge of indignation begin to rise in my throat. "This is my home. It is registered in my name. There are no legal considerations to be entertained." The mediator nodded, a condescending smile gracing her lips, a common trait among professionals who perceive themselves as dealing with an individual lacking in understanding. "I comprehend your position, madam. However, your son posits that he has been residing here, that he has implemented improvements to the property, and that according to specific tenancy statutes, he possesses certain rights that cannot be disregarded." I stared at her, incredulous at the absurdity of her pronouncements. "Marcus is not my tenant. Marcus is my son, who arrived unannounced and without my explicit consent for an indefinite stay." The mediator produced further documentation. "Your son has also indicated that you have been exhibiting erratic behavior recently, and that concerns exist regarding your capacity to make significant decisions. He suggests that it might be prudent to consider granting a power of attorney that would empower him to assist you with financial and property-related matters." In that instant, the full scope of their scheme became unequivocally clear. Marcus and Chloe had escalated their gambit. Their objective was no longer solely my home. They now sought to have me declared legally incompetent, thereby gaining control of all my assets. I rose from the sofa. "Mediator Flores, I appreciate your visit, but this discussion has concluded. I will not be signing any power of attorney. I will not entertain any form of mediation, and I strongly advise you to conduct a thorough inquiry into the individual who engaged your services before you continue to represent him, as my son is attempting to expropriate my property through deceit. The mediator's brow furrowed. Mrs. Vance, I understand you are distressed, but you must recognize that these are grave matters requiring appropriate legal intervention. I have my own legal representative, I stated firmly, and she is in possession of evidence detailing every clandestine plan Marcus and his wife have orchestrated. Therefore, I strongly recommend you depart my residence immediately. Marcus rose to his feet. Mother, we are merely attempting to safeguard you, to protect you from yourself. Your judgment is impaired. You are making impulsive decisions that will ultimately leave you isolated. I looked at my son, and for the very first time, I perceived him with absolute, unflinching clarity. He was not the boy I had raised, nor the young man who had graduated from university. He was a middle-aged man who had concluded that the most expedient route to achieving his desires was through the manipulation of his own mother. Marcus, I said, my voice imbued with a calm that even surprised me. The only impulsive action I committed was permitting you into my home without question. All subsequent actions have been calculated, meticulously planned, and thoroughly documented. And if you persist on this course, the sole outcome will be my absolute refusal to ever see you again. Mediator Flores visibly gathered her papers, her discomfort evident. Mrs. Vance, I shall withdraw, but I will leave my card should you reconsider. I will not reconsider, I replied, escorting her to the door. And I suggest you inform my son that tomorrow marks the deadline I have stipulated. If they have not vacated my residence by 6 o'clock in the evening, I will initiate legal proceedings through the authorities. The lawyer departed without uttering another word. I closed the door and turned to face Marcus and Chloe. You are in a state of desperation, I observed. Your current predicament has led you to attempt to discredit my competence. However, this strategy will prove ineffective. I am not a senile elderly woman whom you can manipulate. I am a 70-year-old woman possessing all my cognitive faculties, with undeniable evidence of your ulterior motives, and with the unequivocal legal authority to remove you from my premises. Chloe took a determined step forward, her gaze burning with indignation. You know what, Ara? I've had enough. Enough of your theatrics, your accusations, your perpetual victimhood. We sought refuge here because we had no other recourse. Marcus had lost his employment, and our funds were depleted, rendering us unable to cover our rent. We came seeking assistance, and instead, you're treating us as if we were criminals. At long last, the truth surfaces, I declared. You finally concede that your arrival was born out of a need for my support, not a desire for my company. And rather than humbly requesting aid, you opted to encroach upon my personal space. You proceeded to alter my residence, harbored intentions of selling my property, and upon my discovery, you attempted to have me declared legally incapable. This, Chloe, is not a plea for help. It is outright coercion. Marcus brought his hands to his face, his voice heavy with defeat. This has spiraled beyond control. Everything has gotten out of hand. My sole intention was to secure temporary shelter. It was Chloe who first broached the subject of selling the house, articulating it as an unproductive asset and suggesting you no longer required it. Chloe turned to him, disbelief etched on her features. Do not presume to place the entirety of the blame upon me, Marcus. You are fully complicit in every decision. You even remarked that your mother's lifespan was finite, and that this house would ultimately become yours. Cease pretending now that I compelled you into any action. I observed their escalating conflict, their exchange of accusations, systematically dismantling any semblance of respect or affection that might have previously existed between them. Amidst their discord, I remained steadfast, experiencing a clarity I hadn't felt in many years. Enough, I proclaimed, my voice resonating with authority. The origin of this endeavor is immaterial to me. The instigator is of no consequence. What matters is that by 6 o'clock tomorrow evening, both of you will have vacated my residence, taking all of your belongings. Should this not occur, at precisely 6 minutes past the hour, I will summon the authorities. I possess all the necessary documentation to substantiate that your presence here is against my express wishes, that you have attempted to usurp my property, and that you have sought to have me declared incompetent to manage my assets. Do not dare to challenge my resolve. I ascended to my chambers and secured the door. My hands trembled, not from apprehension, but from the surge of pure adrenaline. I retrieved my mobile device and initiated a call to Lena. I require your availability tomorrow at 6 o'clock in the evening, I stated to her upon her answering. If they do not depart willingly, we will be compelled to enforce their removal. Lena responded with unwavering resolve. I will be present, Ara. All preparations are complete. The eviction notice is prepared. The evidence is meticulously organized, and I have arranged for an officer to accompany us, should the need arise. Maintain your composure. I expressed my gratitude and concluded the call. That night stretched on interminably. For hours I listened to Marcus and Chloe packing their belongings. I heard the dragging of objects, the slamming of cases, and hushed conversations that I could no longer decipher. At some point in the early hours, an encompassing silence descended. I cautiously peered through my bedroom window and observed that Marcus's vehicle was laden with their possessions. They had indeed packed. Their departure was imminent. At 5 o'clock in the morning, the sound of the front door opening reached my ears. I swiftly rose and exited my room. Marcus was engaged in loading the final few containers into the car. Chloe stood in the doorway, her countenance radiating profound resentment. Upon spotting me, Marcus halted. Mother, we are departing. However, I want you to understand that this matter is far from concluded. I will be speaking with the remainder of the family. I will apprise them of your treatment of us. I will ensure that everyone comprehends the true nature of your character. Proceed as you see fit, I responded, my composure surprising even myself. Share whatever narrative you wish. The truth is unequivocally on my side. Marcus finished loading the last container and exited the house. Chloe cast one final glance in my direction. I sincerely hope this outcome was worth it, Alara. I hope this empty abode brings you immense happiness. With that, she forcefully shut the door. I remained standing in the center of the living room, watching as their vehicle receded down the street until it vanished from sight. The house was utterly silent, a profound quietude I hadn't experienced in weeks. And within this silence, I finally felt capable of breathing. I closed the door behind them and stood in the entryway for what seemed like an eternity, though in reality, it was merely a few minutes. The house was quiet, but it was not the unsettling silence of recent weeks, where I felt perpetually on edge, anticipating covert schemes against me. This was a different kind of silence, a silence that was unequivocally mine. I moved slowly into the living room, taking in the disarray they had left behind. Marks marred the walls where they had hung their pictures. Some of my belongings were still out of their rightful places. The furniture was not arranged as I had originally positioned it, but they were gone. And in that moment, that was the sole aspect of consequence. I settled onto my sofa, which I could now reposition as I pleased, and I allowed myself to experience the full spectrum of emotions I had been suppressing. I did not cry. I had anticipated shedding tears. I thought the departure of my son would shatter me in some irreparable fashion. Yet no tears came. Instead, a profound weariness permeated me, mingled with an emotion that took several minutes to identify. It was relief. It was liberation. It was the distinct sensation of reclaiming something that had been gradually taken from me, so subtly that I hadn't even realized its absence until it was almost too late. My dignity, my personal space, my voice. I reached for my phone and dispatched a message to Joyce. They have departed. They are no longer present. Her response was immediate. I am on my way. I did not reply, understanding her unwavering commitment to her word. I rose and began a slow perambulation through the house, surveying each nook and cranny, every space that had felt alien for weeks. The kitchen, where Chloe had arbitrarily rearranged everything without my consent. The bathroom, where she had deposited her expensive toiletries, monopolizing all the available space. The guest room, where they had slept, undoubtedly engaging in countless clandestine discussions about my future without any consultation. I entered that room, finding it empty, yet thoroughly disheveled. The bed remained unmade. Drawers stood ajar, and hangers lay scattered across the floor. Their hasty departure, likely fueled by the fear of my actual summoning of the authorities. I swung open the windows, allowing fresh air to circulate. I began collecting the hangers, closing the drawers, and stripping the sheets from the bed for laundering. Each motion was an act of reclamation, of purging their presence, of asserting my ownership once more. Upon completing the task in the room, I proceeded to the living room and commenced repositioning the furniture to its original locations. It was not an effortless undertaking. At 70 years of age, maneuvering a sofa presents a considerable challenge, yet I persevered, applying pressure incrementally, pausing to regain my breath, and then continuing. Once the sofa was finally situated to my satisfaction, I sank into it, panting for air, yet a smile graced my lips. "This is mine," I declared aloud to the silent house. "This home belongs to me." The doorbell chimed, and I went to answer it. It was Joyce, bearing a bag of pastries and a large thermos of coffee. "Oh, my dear," she exclaimed, embracing me the moment she saw me. "You did it. You truly accomplished it." We settled into the living room, and I recounted to her how she had remained awake all night, concerned for my well-being, awaiting my message, ready to come at a moment's notice should I require her assistance. I disclosed every detail, how Marcus had enlisted a mediator in an attempt to have me declared legally incapacitated, how Chloe had finally confessed the true reason for their arrival, and how they had departed in the early morning hours, their hearts heavy with resentment. But ultimately, they had left. Joyce listened intently, sipping her coffee, nodding intermittently, and occasionally shaking her head in disbelief. When I concluded my narrative, she clasped my hand. "Ara, do you comprehend the extraordinary courage your actions displayed? You not only stood your ground against them, you emerged victorious. You reclaimed your space, and most importantly, you regained your autonomy. Many women our age never achieve such a feat. They remain ensnared in the role of the sacrificing mother until their final days, allowing their children to trample over them, believing this to be the mark of a devoted parent. But you have shattered that destructive cycle. You prioritized your own well-being. Her words resonated deeply, for she spoke the unvarnished truth. Throughout my life, I had harbored the belief that being a virtuous mother necessitated complete self-abnegation, the absence of any personal boundaries, and the unconditional acceptance of my children's needs, irrespective of the personal cost. However, Marcus had imparted a profoundly painful lesson. He had taught me that affection devoid of respect is not genuine affection, that self-sacrifice without mutual consideration is not a virtue, and that acquiescing to every request ultimately renders one invisible, even to those who ought to value them most. The subsequent days were a period of adjustment. I meticulously reinstated all my belongings to their proper places. I retained my cherished floral cushions. I rehung the family photograph that Marcus had removed to display his ghastly painting. I reorganized the kitchen exactly as it had been prior to their arrival. Each action was a deliberate act of reclamation, of reoccupying my own existence, and as everything returned to its designated position, a part of myself also seemed to return. However, this newfound tranquility proved to be short-lived. 3 days after their departure, the telephone calls commenced. Initially, it was my sister, Aunt Brenda, Marcus's aunt. Oh, Ilara, what transpired with Marcus? He contacted me in tears, proclaiming, "You expelled him from your home. You treated him abominably. You have undergone a complete transformation." I attempted to offer an explanation, but she was disinclined to listen. She merely reiterated that Marcus was my son, that family was defined by unconditional forgiveness, and that I was being excessively severe. I terminated the call upon realizing that conveying my perspective was impossible without recounting the entire saga, a feat for which I lacked the requisite energy. Subsequently, it was my cousin Yvonne. Her approach was more forthright. "Marcus informed me that you evicted him because you disapproved of his wife. That is remarkably adolescent of you. He is your son. You ought to accept his wife, regardless of your personal feelings." I countered that her likability was entirely irrelevant. The issue pertained to respect and established boundaries, but she failed to grasp my meaning. She accused me of selfishness, asserting that elderly individuals should not reside alone, and that I ought to be grateful that my son wished to remain with me. That conversation also concluded on an acrimonious note. The telephonic assaults persisted for several days. Cousins, aunts, uncles, even a few acquaintances whom I barely knew, all relayed the identical narrative that Marcus had disseminated, that I had become embittered, that I had unceremoniously expelled my son without provocation, and that I was living in a state of loneliness and resentment. Not a single individual inquired about my viewpoint. None evinced any desire to comprehend the actual sequence of events. They readily accepted Marcus's portrayal, as was his usual custom, of himself as the victim and me as the antagonist. One afternoon, after enduring the 5th call of the day, I found myself utterly depleted, seated in the living room. Joyce arrived for a visit and discovered my eyes red, not from weeping, but from the sheer exhaustion of repeatedly attempting to articulate my position. "My dear, cease answering the telephone," Joyce advised me with firm resolve. "You owe no one an explanation. Those who truly know you, those who genuinely love you, will place their trust in you without the necessity of your justification. Let the rest harbor whatever opinions they choose." Her words held undeniable truth. Nevertheless, the sting of their judgment persisted. It was agonizing to be subjected to the scrutiny of individuals who possessed no inkling of my ordeal. That evening, while reviewing my mobile device, I noticed a text message from Marcus. It was his first communication since his departure. Mother, I trust you are content. You have achieved your objective. You are now solitary in your prized residence. However, when you are truly aged and require assistance, do not seek me out. I endeavored to be present for you, and you rejected me. Now you must confront the consequences of that decision. I perused the message multiple times, acutely feeling each word's attempt to pierce me with guilt. It aimed to instill the impression that I had erred, that I would ultimately face regret and isolation. I began composing a response. I typed it, deleted it, and repeated the process 3 times before finally transmitting it. Marcus, I am not alone. I am at peace. There exists a profound distinction. You did not endeavor to be present for me. You attempted to seize what rightfully belongs to me. And in preventing you, you are now imposing a penalty by declaring that you will not be there for me in the future. However, my son, the reality is that I required your presence during these past weeks, and you were absent. I required respect. I required consideration. And I required you to perceive me as an individual, not an impediment. And in all these respects, you failed. Therefore, your threat of future absence holds no sway over me, for I have already mastered the art of existing without you. I sent the message and subsequently blocked his telephone number. Joyce was entirely correct when she affirmed that those who genuinely loved me would comprehend. 2 days later, I received a video call from my granddaughter, Paige. Not Marcus's wife, but the daughter of my other son, Elias, who resided in a different state. Grandma, what has transpired with Uncle Marcus? He is sending me messages conveying reprehensible sentiments about you. I recounted the entire episode to her, omitting no detail. I presented some of the video recordings I had captured. I elucidated my feelings, the sequence of events, and the rationale behind my decision. Paige listened attentively without interruption. Upon the conclusion of my account, her eyes welled with tears. Grandma, I am profoundly sorry. I lament that you were compelled to endure such an ordeal, and I regret that Uncle Marcus has revealed himself to be such an individual. However, I am immensely proud of you, so proud that you did not succumb to their manipulations. Her words offered a healing balm far beyond her comprehension. Elias, my other son, also contacted me. Mother, Marcus has presented his version of events, but I am familiar with my brother's character. I understand his nature. If you have made that decision, I am confident you had your reasons. Are you well? Do you require anything? I assured him that I was functioning admirably, indeed, better than I had in a considerable duration. He conveyed that should I ever require any assistance, he was merely a phone call away. That night, I experienced restful sleep. For the first time since this entire distressing episode commenced. A fortnight has elapsed since Marcus and Chloe departed, and life is gradually beginning to feel like my own once more. I have resumed my customary routine. I partake in morning walks with Joyce and our circle of friends from the park. I attend the salon every 2 weeks. I savor my coffee in the living room without the pervasive sensation of being judged or of clandestine machinations occurring behind my back. The house is quiet, but it is a silence that imbues me rather than depletes me. However, an intuitive sense suggested that this chapter was not yet fully closed. I am sufficiently acquainted with Marcus's disposition to recognize that he would not relinquish his pursuit so readily. And indeed, my intuition proved accurate. One Thursday afternoon, as I was tending to the plants on the patio, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find 3 individuals standing there: Marcus, Chloe, and my elder sister, Aunt Brenda. Not the legal representative they had previously engaged, but my sister, the family's designated arbiter for all disputes, the individual to whom everyone turned due to her inherent role as mediator and peacemaker. Ara, my sister began softly, we need to engage in a conversation, all of us, as a family. I have no desire to converse with them, I responded, remaining firmly positioned in the doorway. Ara, please, my sister implored. Marcus contacted me in a state of utter devastation. He conveyed that he had made errors, that he harbors regrets, and that he wishes to reconcile with you. Grant him the opportunity to provide an explanation. I felt a strong inclination to close the door, yet a part of me was curious to ascertain their discourse, to discover what new stratagem they had devised to sway me. I permitted them entry. We convened in the living room, Marcus and Chloe occupying the sofa, my sister seated in one of the individual armchairs, and I in the other. A prolonged and awkward silence ensued. Finally, Marcus initiated the conversation. Mother, I have come to solicit your forgiveness. I committed a grave error. I allowed Chloe's influence to sway me. I succumbed to the financial pressures and allowed desperation to dictate my actions, but my intention was never to cause you harm. You are my mother, and I love you. Chloe nodded in agreement beside him. Lara, I too offer my apologies. I entered your home with a fundamentally flawed mindset. I was overwhelmed by the stress of our circumstances and failed to consider the impact of my actions on you. I listened to their words, feeling utterly devoid of emotion. No anger, no sorrow, not even a sense of vindication. Only a profound emptiness because their apologies mirrored precisely all previous instances where Marcus had sought my absolution throughout his life. Hollow, perfunctory, uttered out of obligation rather than genuine remorse. My sister interjected. Ara, consider this. I am aware of the difficulty of the situation. Marcus has apprehended me of every detail. He recounted the appraiser's involvement, their carefully laid plans, and yes, their actions were indeed reprehensible, profoundly so. However, he is your son, and children are prone to making mistakes. Do you not believe he merits a second opportunity? A second chance? I repeated, my gaze fixed upon her. Brenda, Marcus has been afforded second, third, and even fourth chances throughout his existence. Each time he requested financial assistance and failed to reciprocate. Each time he pledged to alter his behavior, only to remain unchanged. Each instance where he materialized at my doorstep, solely when he required something. This is not the initial occasion he has disappointed me. This is merely the moment I have finally reached my limit of condoning such behavior. My sister sighed. Elara, but to evict him so abruptly, effectively abandoning him and his wife to destitution. Do you not perceive your actions as excessively severe? I did not leave them destitute, I replied, my voice firm. I afforded them a full week to locate alternative accommodations and to organize themselves, and this decision was not made impulsively. It was enacted subsequent to the discovery of their intentions to sell my home, to place me in assisted living without prior consultation, and when that scheme failed, to attempt to have me declared legally incapacitated to manage my assets. Therefore, no, Brenda, I do not believe I was excessively harsh. I believe my response was precisely as severe as it needed to be to safeguard myself. Marcus leaned forward, his hands clasped. Mother, I comprehend your anger. I truly do. However, we are in a desperate situation. I lost my employment 6 months ago. We have been unable to meet our rent obligations. We are currently residing in a deplorable rented room with minimal space, subsisting on the meager income Chloe earns cleaning houses. I sought you out because you are my mother. I believed you would be able to assist us. And yes, perhaps my handling of the situation was misguided, but it stemmed from fear, from a sense of utter helplessness. His words were strategically crafted to evoke sympathy, to make me feel a pang of guilt for possessing stability while they endured hardship. However, I had fallen prey to such manipulative tactics far too many times. Marcus, I stated calmly, had you approached my door 2 months prior and articulated your predicament with complete honesty, I would have offered my assistance. I would have permitted you to reside here temporarily. I would have supported you during your job search, but that is not what transpired. You arrived unannounced. You behaved as though you were the proprietor of my home. You harbored intentions of pilfering my property, and you attempted to portray me as mentally incompetent when I uncovered your scheme. You did not come seeking aid. You came to seize what you erroneously perceived as rightfully yours. And these are two fundamentally dissimilar circumstances. Chloe finally spoke, her voice quivering. I am aware that you harbor an aversion towards me. I am cognizant of that fact, but I am with child. We only recently discovered this a week ago, and it is the reason for our extreme desperation. We are expecting a child, and we lack a suitable place to reside. I felt as though I had been physically struck. A baby. I was to become a grandmother once more, and my initial instinct, an instinct honed over 70 years, was to yield, to concede, to declare everything acceptable, to permit them to remain, to offer my assistance. However, something arrested me, something far more potent than instinct, memory, the memory of my emotional state during those preceding weeks, the memory of the overheard conversations where they plotted my future without my input, the memory of the absolute clarity that permeated my being, the certainty that if I relented now, my life would never be fully reclaimed. I regret your predicament, I finally stated, and my words, though perhaps colder than I intended, carried an undeniable honesty. I regret the difficulties you are currently facing. I regret that you will be bringing a child into the world under such challenging circumstances, but that does not absolve you of your actions. It does not erase the conversations I overheard, the schemes you concocted, or the profound lack of respect you demonstrated towards me. My sister shook her head. Elara, are you truly going to allow your grandchild to be born in a squalid, rented room when you possess a home with ample space? What kind of grandmother behaves in such a manner? The kind of grandmother who has learned that offering assistance does not equate to enabling abusive behavior, I replied, directing my gaze squarely at her. The kind of grandmother who understands that if I permit you to return now, the situation will only deteriorate further, as you will then employ the baby as a means to remain indefinitely. You will contend that the infant is too young to relocate. You are going to claim you require my assistance with the infant. Little by little, I will fade back into obscurity within my own residence. However, this instance, I will be powerless to intervene, as a child is involved. I refuse to be ensnared in that ploy. Marcus rose to his feet. Your self-centeredness is astonishing. I always believed you to be a devoted mother, but it appears your maternal instincts only surfaced when it was convenient for you, without demanding any genuine personal sacrifice. His accusation held no surprise for me. It was a last resort. When entreaties for sympathy failed, guilt was deployed next. And when guilt proved ineffective, a direct assault commenced. I, too, stood up. For 50 years, Marcus, I was a dedicated mother. I nurtured you. I provided for you. I worked diligently to ensure you received an education, and I stood by every decision you made. And when I finally sought a modicum of respect from you, you faltered. So do not speak to me of sacrifice. My contributions have been ample." Chloe also rose, tears cascading down her cheeks. "Very well, Era. We understand. You have no desire to aid us, nor to participate in your grandchild's existence. We will certainly recall this. When that child inquires about his grandmother, we shall convey the unvarnished truth. We will tell him, 'You turned your back on us when we needed you most.'" Her words were crafted to inflict pain, to sow seeds of guilt that would fester over time. Yet my decision was already resolute. "Narrate whatever you deem fit," I responded, "but also inform him that his grandmother possessed her dignity, that she refused to be manipulated, and that she ultimately chose herself when everyone else pressured her to make yet another sacrifice." My sister stood shaking her head. "I scarcely recognize you, Ara. This is unlike you. This is merely the consequence of women growing aged and embittered, forgetting the essence of family." I observed my sister, the woman who had been my constant companion through countless life events, and I realized she would never truly grasp my perspective, as she remained the person I once was, the woman who equated her worth with her capacity to give, to endure, to sacrifice. While that may have served her well, it no longer aligned with my own needs. The three of them departed in silence. I closed the door behind them, enveloped by the quietude of my home. I shed no tears, harbored no regrets. I simply inhaled. I drew a deep breath, acknowledging the gravity of my recent decision, recognizing the likelihood of losing my son irrevocably, understanding the inevitable judgment from my family for years to come, yet also affirming the correctness of my choice. I had chosen myself. The subsequent months were a period of adaptation, learning, and self-discovery, unburdened by the persistent obligation to appease others. The initial weeks presented the greatest challenge. There were instances where I found myself anticipating a message from Marcus on my phone, a message that never materialized. There were nights when I questioned the severity of my actions, whether I had overstepped a boundary. However, recalling the overheard conversations, their meticulously laid plans, and the way they regarded me as if I were an obsolete piece of furniture needing relocation, dissolved all uncertainty. Joyce became my steadfast support throughout those months. She visited 2 or 3 times weekly. We shared coffee in the living room, enjoyed strolls in the park, and attended the cinema when a film piqued our interest. One afternoon, as we sat on my patio observing the sunset, she shared a sentiment that remains etched in my memory. "Ara, my mother dedicated her entire life to sacrificing for my brothers. One struggled with alcoholism. Another was perpetually unable to maintain employment. My mother was consistently there, bailing them out, providing them with funds, and offering them shelter. And do you know what transpired in the end? When she fell ill, when she required assistance, not a single one of them was present. They had never learned to value her. They had only learned to exploit her. You have avoided that pitfall. You halted the cycle in time. Her words provided a new vantage point for my decision. I had not forsaken my son. I had rejected the mistreatment. I had established boundaries that should have been implemented years prior. Despite the pain and the intermittent resurfacing of guilt, I was certain of the rectitude of my actions. Approximately 3 months after Marcus departed, I received a telephone call from Elias, my other son. "Mom, I need to relay something to you. Marcus contacted me yesterday. He is requesting financial assistance. He claims to be in dire straits. that they are expecting a child and that he possesses nothing. He implored me to intercede on his behalf, to persuade you to reconsider allowing him to return. I informed him that I would not involve myself in their affairs, that this was a matter solely between you two, but I felt it imperative to inform you. I expressed my gratitude for his candor. Elias then added, "Mom, while I am not privy to the entirety of your situation, I am confident that if you chose to distance yourself from Marcus, it was for valid reasons. I wish for you to know that I stand in support of your decision. Should you ever require anything, I am here, not to rescue you, but to accompany you." His words imbued me with a warmth I had not experienced in months. Time continued its inexorable march. 4 months, 5, 6. My daily existence grew richer, more fulfilling. I enrolled in a painting class at the community center. I discovered a latent talent for landscapes, an ability to lose myself for hours, brush in hand, contemplating only colors and forms. I forged new friendships within that class, women my age who, like me, were rediscovering their identities after years of being solely wives, mothers, or caregivers. One of these women, Luella Metz, whose surname began with the same letter as my friend's, but was entirely distinct, became a cherished confidant. She had navigated a comparable situation with her daughter. She recounted how her daughter had attempted to commit her, to seize her home, had forged documents, and had nearly succeeded. Luella, however, mounted a fierce defense, retained legal counsel, reclaimed control of her assets, and had been estranged from her daughter for 5 years. "Not a single day do I regret," she shared one afternoon as we painted together, "because I learned that a mother's love does not necessitate enduring destruction. It means possessing sufficient self-love to refuse abuse, even from one's own children." 7 months after the initial events, on a Saturday morning, as I prepared to visit the hair salon, the doorbell rang. Upon opening it, I was greeted by an unknown young woman. She held a baby swaddled in a blue blanket. "Mrs. Vance," she inquired timidly. "I am Chloe's cousin. She asked me to speak with you." My heart quickened its pace. "Chloe, is she well? And the infant?" The young woman nodded. "Yes, they are both well. The baby was born a month ago. It is a boy, and his name is Matteo. Chloe wished for you to meet him, but she was apprehensive about appearing in person." I gazed at the infant in her arms. He was tiny, perfect, utterly unaware of the preceding events. A tender ache, mingled with sadness, welled within me, but I remained resolute. "I appreciate your coming," I told the young woman gently, "but I cannot accept the baby if it signifies reopening a door that I must keep firmly shut. Please convey to Chloe my best wishes, my hope that they are thriving, and my earnest desire that they care for Matteo diligently. However, I am not prepared for contact with them. Perhaps at some future juncture, but not presently." The young woman nodded with understanding. Chloe anticipated such a response. She simply wished to make the attempt. She provided me with her telephone number, should I ever reconsider. I closed the door and leaned against it, my hands trembling. A grandchild existed, a baby bearing my lineage, whom I had refused to meet. Guilt attempted to overwhelm me in that instant, whispering that I was a dreadful grandmother, a person devoid of compassion. Yet I recollected all that had transpired. I recalled the conversations, the schemes, the attempts to dispossess me of my home, and I understood that if I were to open that door now, if I allowed the infant to serve as a pretext for reconciliation, the situation would inevitably revert to its former state. Marcus and Chloe would wield the child as a tool for manipulation, to engender a sense of obligation, to secure financial support, to facilitate their return, and I would find myself precisely where I began. I telephoned Joyce and informed her of the occurrence. She arrived without delay. She found me seated in the living room, my gaze fixed into the distance. "My dear," she said, settling beside me, "I understand this is painful. I recognize that declining to meet your grandson seems contrary to everything one believes a grandmother should embody. But you did not reject the infant. You rejected the abuse. And these are two fundamentally different circumstances. Had Marcus and Chloe genuinely desired your acquaintance with your grandson, they would have presented themselves. They would have approached with respect, with sincere apologies, and with genuine intent to mend the relationship. However, dispatching another individual with the baby is merely another form of manipulation. It places the onus upon you without requiring them to undertake the effort of genuine change. She was, as always, correct, and her words fortified me to proceed. The months continued to elapse, marking a full year since Marcus and Chloe's departure. My life had undergone a complete metamorphosis. I was no longer the individual who unquestioningly opened her door to all. I was no longer the person who acquiesced to every request for fear of being perceived as a deficient mother, grandmother, or individual. I had learned that asserting a refusal was an act of self-preservation, that establishing boundaries was not synonymous with selfishness, and that my own life, my tranquility, and my dignity were also of paramount importance. One Sunday afternoon, as I was engrossed in painting a mountainous landscape on my patio, my telephone rang. It was an unrecognized number. I answered with caution. "Mama." It was Marcus. His voice possessed a different timbre, softer, wearier. I remained silent, awaiting his words. "Mama, I acknowledge I have no right to contact you. I recognize I have irrevocably damaged our relationship. I merely wish to convey that you were entirely correct in all matters. Chloe and I separated 2 months ago. She departed with the baby to reside with her mother. I am living alone, working at a gas station, endeavoring to rebuild my life. And with each passing day, I contemplate my transgressions against you, my disrespectful conduct, and I am consumed by shame. I continued to offer no verbal response, simply listening. I am not calling to solicit your forgiveness, he continued. I am not calling to request anything. I simply wanted you to know that I am profoundly sorry, that I comprehend the rationale behind your actions. And although it was painful at the time, I now realize that I needed that harsh lesson. I needed to confront the repercussions of my choices. Thank you, Mama. Thank you for preventing me from trampling over you. And with that, he concluded the call. I remained seated, the phone cradled in my hand for an extended period. I experienced no sense of triumph, no satisfaction that Marcus had finally achieved understanding. I felt only a profound serenity, a certainty that my decision had been the right one. Even when it presented the most arduous path, even when I faced universal censure, even when the emotional distress was so acute that I doubted my capacity to endure it. I surveyed my surroundings, my home, my personal space, my life, all meticulously arranged according to my preferences. The plants I had cultivated flourished, the paintings I had created adorned the walls, and the photographs of my companions were displayed on the digital frame gifted by Joyce. My phone was replete with messages from my walking group, my painting class, and from Elias and Paige, inquiring about my well-being. I was not isolated. I was at peace. And that peace had exacted the highest conceivable price. It had cost me my son, at least for the interim. It had cost me the approval of my family. It had cost me the idealized image of the perfect grandmother I had always aspired to project. but it had returned something infinitely more valuable: myself. I rose from the chair, drew a deep breath of the fresh evening air, and returned to my canvas. The landscape was nearing completion. Verdant mountains beneath an unclouded sky, and in the lower corner, with delicate, precise brushstrokes, I inscribed a phrase I had never before featured on any of my works. My name, Ara Vance, aged 71 years, finally liberated. At long last, after many years, I was the one dictating the terms of whom I would support, and that individual was me. Super. Thanks.